Thank you very much. When I do workshops on this topic, I'm going to make you raise your hands a couple more times. I ask people, how many of you, it's great, we all have technology, we all have it in our pockets, maybe more than one device. How many of you would describe yourselves as providing online services with your newcomer clients? Okay, and it goes up every year. Now, how many of you use email or search for information or share information with your clients that you've gotten online? Yeah, so you email your clients. The rest of you are also providing online services, and I think it's really important for us to remember that while immigrants are farther ahead of us in use of technology, the reality is that we are using technology already in our service provision with clients. We just don't name it that. Something like email is ubiquitous. It's like using the phone. But the moment you send a client an email, you're providing an online service of some form, and I think it's important to know that. And the reality is that we do need and can incorporate technology more effectively in our work with our clients because they're using it more. And when I talk about internet use amongst newcomers, I think one of the important things is for us to look at where they're coming from, the source countries. Settlement agencies, it's useful for you to explore where your clients are coming from and what the types of trends are. So in the top left corner of this slide, we see internet penetration rates. And so North America is very much at the top. In fact, we're over 90% this year. Whereas Asia, where a lot of newcomers are coming from, it's a third of the countries have internet penetration is about 35% in those countries. But if you flip that into sheer numbers, Asia represents that's 1.4 billion people who have internet access compared to 300 million in North America. And so when we look at the penetration rate versus North America, the number of users or potential users is much higher. And so when we dive into that a little bit more, we see that in the Asia-Pacific region, where there are over 4 billion people, there are 3.7 billion mobile subscriptions and over 1 billion active social media accounts. In Africa, where there's over 1 billion people, there are 900 million mobile subscriptions and 100 million active social media accounts. In the Americas, with almost 1 billion people, there are over 1 billion mobile subscriptions and almost 500 million active social media accounts. In Europe, it's 800 million people, 1.1 billion people with mobile subscriptions and almost 400 million accounts, social media accounts. And in the Middle East, with about 240 million, there are 295 million active mobile subscriptions with about 40 million active social media accounts. And in fact, half of those are in Egypt. So you look at some of these places in mobile use, there's more mobile subscriptions than people. And it's interesting to look at those trends to see where people are coming from so we can get a sense of how internet and mobile use is exploding exponentially in the source countries where our newcomers are coming from and how it's continuing to grow. So in places like Asia, where it's 35% penetration, that's only going to increase, obviously, because they're moving towards more internet, more mobile use. In places like Africa, there are countries where developmentally they can't afford to lay a wire down for phone lines, so they've gone to cellular networks. They're mobile first, they're digital first, and these aren't necessarily all using smartphones, they're using more feature phones, but the reality is they're doing many more things than we might be doing on our phones, bartering, finding work, sharing information and resources and things like that. So demand for services mediated by technology online is only going to grow, including on mobile devices. And mobile increasingly does mean social media and social networks. So does it mean that we should all run out and jump on the social media bandwagon and just start setting up accounts on Twitter and Facebook without thinking through the right steps? And the answer is it does mean that if you haven't yet, you need to start asking questions about how your clients, including your pre-arrival clients, if you have them, and potential clients want to interact with you. Like any of the work in innovation that you do, you need to be strategic, you need to do the needs assessment, and you need to make informed decisions. And the right steps start with your clients. Your target audience is already with you. The people you're trying to figure out how they're using this technology are your clients who you serve on a daily basis. You need to find out from them how they want to be served, how they might be interested in accessing your services in different ways. And hopefully some of you recognize this popular education spiral model. At the core of any good idea, you start with what people already know. And in this case, it's your clients. So are you asking them how they're using technology? What technology expectations do they have of you? What channels, whether in person or online, do they want you to be offering to them? And should this be part of your intake process, asking questions about their technology use, about how they're interacting with technology? You need to confirm any trends and specific information with your clients directly, but what general trends do we already know a little bit about? Well, in 2007, Statistics Canada did some research and told us that among people born in Canada at that time, 75% used the internet compared to 66% amongst newcomers. But if they looked only in the previous 10 years, newcomers used the internet more than we did, 78%. And in my experience, if you go back even further, when I was providing service to clients, the anecdotal trend is the same. I'm talking about when the internet was in its infancy. Think about using Windows 3.1. My clients were using AOL chat to communicate with friends and family back home because long distance charges were astronomical. We weren't doing that in our agencies because we didn't have to. So they were already ahead of us as agencies. Last year, Yahoo confirmed the trend amongst newcomers. They took a look at digital and mobile, and they told us that when it comes to media preferences, new Canadians are digital first, with a particular focus on mobile devices. So they're using their smartphones and tablets more than we are as native-born Canadians. They're using online calling or video chatting apps to stay in touch with friends and family. Again, a trend that has always continued because it's cheaper and easier. They're also wanting to consume information in their native languages, which we already know, and provide some of that information. But the reality is that they're using the internet and mobile in ways that we may not be used to. And so if we look at some of the top messaging apps, for example, around the world, the trend is consistent and is growing. So Canada has, on average, 83 mobile subscriptions per 100 inhabitants, about 29 million people, whereas in China, they jumped up to 92 per 100, which only represents 1.3 billion. In places like the Philippines, another source country, they've got 111 subscriptions per 100 inhabitants. So again, as you noticed in the previous stats, there are places where they have multiple mobile subscriptions and are using this technology. And I remember being at the CIIP conference a couple years ago, and they were trying to do outreach to bring people to their pre-arrival workshops in the Philippines, and email just wasn't getting anywhere. When they switched to texting, they started to fill those workshops. So it's appropriate technology for the audiences that you're trying to reach, and that's why you've got to delve very deeply into the people you're working with. So if they're using mobile apps that you may not even know of or are using, or you might be using, but you're not thinking about how they can be used as service tools. So for example, until I did this research, I had no idea what Viber was, or vContact, or even KakaoTalk. But Viber has got 600 million users, including in North America. It's being used by Syrian refugees to communicate with family back home when they arrive currently in Europe predominantly, but even in the Za'atari refugee camp, they're on mobile devices. If you're serving Russian clients, vContact is their go-to app. If you're serving South Korean clients, it's KakaoTalk. And if you're looking at clients from China, there are 1.1 billion users of WeChat. Only 100 million of those are outside of China. So there's a billion users, up to 600 million active users, which means not everyone who's subscribed is actively using it every day. But if you're serving clients from China, is WeChat something you should be asking them about? Is that how they're interacting and getting information? And is that a place that you might need to be on? And things like WeChat aren't just messaging apps. For those who use it, you know this more than I am. And Facebook is trying to start moving in this direction. They're a portal. Commerce happens. Group information happens. Or organizations and brands are providing information to clients using these apps, as simple as they sound. And online learning, while it's just starting to take off in our sector, is becoming more important. Organizations like iSense, Costi, Ocasi, CultureLink, and a few others have been offering online courses for a few years with much success. In fact, people may have heard of CultureLink's massive open online course recently on creating an expert LinkedIn profile for job seekers, which they focused on newcomers. They had, in their first run, 2,000 students. That's why it's massive. And they ran it again a few months later. And at least half of those users were overseas, pre-arrival potential. So getting people ready for the job search and their branding and their personal information before they even arrive. The importance of that for settlement success can't be denied. The online learning industry is a growing industry. This year, it doubled from last year, and it's going to continue growing. And if we look again at source countries, so for example, North America shows not a tremendous growth because it's already pretty saturated, but Asia, the Middle East are only growing. Countries like India and China are experiencing a 50% growth rate over the last year. So online learning is something that if we look at where our clients are coming from, they're accessing this information. They understand this technology, and they might want for you to start looking at how you can use it to serve them as well. Now, there's also, when we think about online, we think about the social networks like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. We think about the big ones, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever it might be. But with the preeminence of this social media, word-of-mouth information about immigration and settlement is increasingly being shared online, but it's in some of these niche social networks. Tens of thousands of newcomers share information about orientation and settlement and pre-arrival on discussion boards like settlement.org, which hopefully most of you know about. But there's also sites like these, some of which are started by immigration consultants, and some of which have been started by newcomers themselves. So a site like CanadaVisa.com, yes, it's predominantly focused on immigration information from a consultant, but of course that discussion board evolved into also discussing settlement information. Loon Lounge is one of the most popular sites that is completely focused, or predominantly focused, on settlement information, started by an immigration consultant once again, but not even there's no advertising on the site for him. Canadian Desi, if you're serving South Asian clients in the GTA, you need to be on this site. So it begs the question that we already know that a relatively small percentage of newcomers access mainstream in-person government and settlement services. So what do online social networking sites mean about how they might be potentially bypassing your services even more? What's your role as agencies in providing service on sites like these? Or at the very least, looking at them as rich outreach opportunities. If I say to you that there are 75,000 people who are potential clients for you in one place, does it make sense for you to start providing service or information or develop a presence in those spaces? It's questions that are important to ask. And these are just the English language sites, the big ones. There's tons of them that are in other languages. Many of you already have perhaps used those sites, used them regularly, or used them in part of your immigration process. Russian language sites, Chinese language sites, Tagalog, and things like that. So how can we be providing service in those spaces? It's not all about the technology, it's about the strategy for us in terms of how you deliver services to them. How can we complement existing service delivery to clients in another way to give them help? How do we determine what the best way to use technology is? And it's not just about tech use with clients, but within the sector as well. What are we evaluating? How has technology used in pre-arrival services improved settlement success of clients? And how do we share information inside our offices and within the settlement sector? And we also need to work with our funders so they understand that online service is legitimate service, and we can figure out how to implement, track, and evaluate outcomes. And at the end of the day, it still is very much about technology, but it's essential that as we look at this, we need to create secure, encrypted intake processes, but also secure service environments. So whether it's through encrypted email, which is easier than ever to use, secure video or text chat, or password-protected online discussion groups. You need to make sure that privacy, security, and confidentiality is baked into your client services online in the same way that you ensured offline. So if you're starting to have client interactions on a place like Facebook, which is completely unprivate, are you making sure that your client's privacy is intact even if they're not? What's the digital literacy you need in order to help your clients understand that literacy? And some key principles that I have around this is when we're looking at technology, we're looking at no loss of human service interaction with our clients, minimal increase in workload for staff, and instead we're talking about a change in how you might do your work. It's not about adding 3 hours at the end of everyone's day. It's shifting the way we work during the day. Your services online have to complement your offline because you already know what you're doing and you just need to shift some of that into an online space or another channel for your clients. And this is not for all clients. But a new form of client is emerging, which I call the hybrid client. There's going to be more and more people who want to access your services sometimes offline, sometimes in person, and sometimes online. And so why wouldn't we offer? We're client-centric, we're client-focused. We need to be responsive to the realities and needs of how our clients want to access our services. And the more I speak to individual settlement workers, the more innovation is out there. It's pockets, it's kind of hidden. They're a little afraid sometimes. So we, as agencies, need to harness their knowledge, their experience to create better systems, to create policies to drive innovation, and to mine and share their learning and knowledge across the sector. So as we imagine the settlement agency of the future, a project of Pathways to Prosperity, we need to first better understand the digital and settlement literacy of immigrants to Canada, and we need to just simply ask them. They're right in front of you, and they want this kind of service. Thanks.